During World War I, there was one execution that sparked much outrage across the world. Following the death of Edith Cavell, newspapers and leaflets were published showing the barbarism of the German enemy, for in the eyes of the British public, a rather innocent nurse had been executed in cold blood by the Germans. After her execution, scores of men rushed to enlist in military service for the conflict, and because of this her death was one of the most prominent of the whole of the conflict. Before the conflict she was not known outside of nursing, however after, Edith Cavell's name became one synonymous with the evils of the enemy. Today we look at the ruthless execution of Edith Cavell, the nurse shot by the Germans, and remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Born on the 4th of December 1865 in a village near to Norwich in Norfolk, Edith Cavell had humble beginnings. Her father was a vicar and she was educated at a local girls' school before she was transferred to boarding schools. One establishment she attended, Laurel Court in Peterborough, was ruled over by a fearsome dragon, and it was said that the school smelt of cats and treacle. However, here French was taught. Edith began to show an aptitude for her language lessons, and after she was recommended for a job in Brussels in 1890. Before this she worked as a governess, and worked to look after different households. She maintained a normal life, enjoying tennis and dancing, and was known to be a fun woman. In 1890 she worked with a family called the Francois in Brussels, and stayed here for 5 years. Here whilst working she became fluent in French, however her father then became ill, and she returned to England to care for him. She helped to restore him to full health, and then decided to take up nursing as a career. Edith worked in a number of different hospitals, initially before being accepted for training at the London Hospital in 1896. The following summer she worked in Maidstone, helping to deal with an epidemic of typhoid fever that broke out, and she received the Maidstone Medal for her work. She then transitioned into a brief spell in private nursing, before returning to the front lines. She became an assistant matron at Shoreditch Infirmary, and she was known for her caring nature visiting patients after their discharge. She then worked in Manchester and built up a strong reputation for herself as a very capable and strong nurse. In 1907 she then returned to Brussels, and she began to work in Belgium training nurses in the same ways of Florence Nightingale. At the time nuns had been caring for the sick and had no formal training. Edith immediately rose to the job, and she instigated regimented routines for the women and also gave lectures to the doctors and nurses. She often returned home to England, and as the First World War broke out and the Germans invaded Belgium, she heard of the news whilst gardening at her mother's. She said, "At a time like this, I'm more needed than ever." Whilst in Brussels, she instilled a rule that the first duty of the nurses was to care for the wounded, regardless of their nationality, and her hospital became a Red Cross one. It helped German soldiers as well as Belgian soldiers. Brussels, however, fell, and when this happened the Germans sent 60 English nurses home, but Edith Cavell remained. The German advance into Belgium was successful, and the British and French were forced back. Now during the German occupation of the city, Brussels fell under German military rule. Edith Cavell began to work through a moral dilemma. Despite being a protected member of the Red Cross, she wished to sacrifice her conscience to help smuggle away men and help Allied soldiers escape German custody. She began to operate as part of an underground network, in which she helped to shelter wounded British and French soldiers and civilians, and to help them escape to the neutral Netherlands. She also helped to provide Belgian and French civilians who were of military age to obtain false papers. The underground group had been masterminded by the Prince and Princess de Croix at Mons, and guides were organised to help smuggle people out of the country. The operation lasted for around a year, and it's estimated that she helped to save the lives of over 200 men. However, suspicions arose in around August 1915, as the German authorities began to suspect something occurring inside the hospital. After being discharged from hospital, the Germans noticed that patients were seemingly disappearing. Despite being told once to stop by fellow nurses, Nurse Cavell continued to operate in this way. In early August 1915, however, she was arrested for harbouring Allied soldiers. She had been betrayed and was then held in prison for 10 weeks, and was interrogated by German officials about her crimes of helping Allied soldiers escape captivity. She was willing to abuse her position in the Red Cross to help, and she said, "Had I not helped, the men would have been shot." During questioning, she did admit to helping British and French soldiers and plenty of civilians, and she was placed on trial. She was accused of helping the enemy's soldiers and was accused of treason. This was allowed to take place, as at the time Brussels fell under German rule, and she was seen as a member of the state because of this. She admitted her guilt a day before the trial, and she said that the soldiers even wrote to her thanking her when they arrived back in Britain. The penalty for this, according to German military law, was death, and as she was present in the zone of war, the German military code allowed this to take place. So Edith Cavell was sentenced to death for hiding and smuggling those people out of Belgium. The British government could do very little to help, but the Americans tried to help her case. They stated that the execution of Cavell would rank up with the outrage similar to the sinking of the Lusitania. Now a senior German official, Baron von der Lancken, was aware that due to her honesty, Cavell could have been pardoned. However, the military governor of Brussels overruled this, saying that it was in the interest of the state to execute Cavell, and along with 4 others she was sentenced to death for their roles, but only 2 death sentences were carried out. The Germans knew that they needed to execute Cavell quickly to avoid further outrage and condemnation. On the 12th of October 1915 at 7 a.m, Edith Cavell was taken out of her prison cell to the National Shooting Range at Schaerbeek. A total of 16 men carried out the death sentences that had been passed. A German priest had managed to track down an English one to visit Cavell on the night before she died. Together they repeated the words of "Abide with me," and Edith was given the sacrament. She said that, "I am thankful to have had these 10 weeks of quiet to get ready. I've been kindly treated here. I expect my sentence and I believe it was just. I realise that patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone." Very quickly her execution was carried out. She was taken into the rifle range, and at a distance of 6 paces she faced her executioners. There are different accounts of Edith Cavell's execution. One states how the men fired wide of Edith, and that she allegedly fainted before being finally executed at point-blank range by a German officer. A priest who witnessed the event stated how she was led to the pole and was loosely bound. A blindfold was put over her eyes, and they were full of tears. After a few seconds the sharp commands were given. 2 salvos of gunfire crashed through the range, and the 2 condemned persons sank to the ground without a sound. My eyes were fixed on Miss Cavell, and what they now saw was terrible. With her face streaming with blood, one shot had gone through her forehead. Miss Cavell had sunk forwards, but 3 times she raised herself up without a sound. These were only reflex movements. The bullet holes as large as fists in her back proved that she was killed immediately. A few minutes later she was placed in a coffin and was lowered into a grave. It was said that no soldier refused to shoot. However, there was a rumour that one soldier did, and he himself was shot for refusing to carry out orders. Back home in Britain and around the world there was much outrage. The execution of Edith Cavell was one used in propaganda, and she was seen as a martyr and a victim at the hands of the enemy. Edith herself did not want to be remembered as a hero, but instead wanted to be a nurse who had tried to do her duty. The shooting of her was not forgiven, and was used to help eventually bring the US into the conflict. For 8 weeks after her death, the British propaganda led to recruitment to double in the aftermath. She was later reinterred, and her remains were brought back to England, where she had an elaborate ceremony at Westminster Abbey, before she was buried in the East End of Norwich Cathedral. Interestingly, in 2015, it was announced by a former Director General of MI5 that Edith Cavell was gathering intelligence for the British as part of her work in the hospital, and it was confirmed that she used secret codes, and this helped to successfully hand over intel. However, it's clear that her execution did have a prominent role during the First World War. Today, Edith Cavell is commemorated in many different ways, and she is remembered for being a nurse who paid the ultimate price during World War I. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.